Hi scrap friends, it's Louise here of Timeless Craft Mama, sharing a layout with you today that's for my DT position over at Off the Rails Scrapbooking. So this layout is called You Colour My World. I'm going to admit that I really struggled with this mood board initially, but once I moved past the vintage type look of it, I chose to work primarily with the blue, yellow and red colours to put my layout together. So to start with, I've taken some white cardstock and I'm just going to go ahead and apply some watercolour paint through this Heidi Swap stencil. Now I had a bit of an idea of what I wanted to do with this page, but as I started to work with it, it wasn't going where I wanted it to go. So you'll see that as we progress, I'm going to start to make some changes. And the first thing I wanted to do was to not make it so neat and structured. So while I'd use the stencil, I wanted to sort of mess it up a little bit. So with that in mind, I'm just taking some acrylic paint and just spreading that around over where I'd stenciled, just with a spatula. So that sort of gave me more of the look I was going for, rather than being that real structured look that I got through the stencil. So when I initially started to think about what I wanted this layout to look like, embossing wasn't something that I thought would go on this page, but now that I've applied the acrylic paint, I'm sort of looking at it and I'm starting to wonder how I can break it up a little bit. It was starting to look a bit bright, it didn't really match the mood board, so I'm just using some embossing ink and white embossing powder just to stop the harshness of those colours. So you'll see when the next slide shows up that it just breaks it up a little bit. I'm still not quite happy with the way this background looks, so I'm going back to the watercolours and I'm just going to spread some of that colour around. By this point I was starting to feel like if this hadn't come out the way I wanted it to look, I was going to give up on this particular background and start the whole process over again. But as I began to apply some of the watercolour, it really started to get closer to what I'd imagined in my head this particular layout was going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and keep layering that watercolour, and then also you'll see me just spreading some of that watercolour, splattering it around on the page with the brush. So that again just gave it that kind of feel that I was looking for, where it wasn't so structured. It was you know, a little bit grungy, a little bit messy looking, but it still had that really colourful desired effect that I was looking for. Now you'll notice in the bottom right hand corner of the video that I've picked out my photo and I've also chosen some flowers from my stash. Now this photo was also the reason why I used the colours as inspiration, because you'll see a little bit later that the photo is of Master C and he's in his little push car, and the car is blue, yellow and red. So I really felt like this particular photo represented the mood board. It's really summery, really fun, and it really reflected the colours that were in that mood board as well. So that's the reason why I've picked that. Now as for the flowers, as much as I tried to pick them in the colours that were part of the mood board, I decided that I wanted to paint them in the same acrylic paint that I'd already used on my layout. And this was just a consistency thing really, because I had some that were kind of pink and light pink and some that were white, and I really just wanted everything to blend. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply some acrylic paint to these flowers to get them all a bit more uniform. You'll see in the top left that I've already done those blue flowers off camera, so I'm just going through and doing the yellow and the red, ready to pop them onto the layout. flowers were quite a big part of my layouts for a while there. It's not something I've used in a little bit of time. I have a big stash of them, which is part of the reason why I try to use them so that they're not sitting around doing nothing. But at the same time, I just haven't felt that my layouts lately really needed flowers. The image that I had in my head of this particular layout certainly was that flowers were a big feature of it, so that's why I've gone ahead and used those flowers. Now, when looking at my photo and the background that I was going to put this on, I decided that my photo was just a little bit too structured, so I'm just going ahead and rubbing some gesso around it just to give it that little white border to try and make things blend a little bit better. I'm also using some really great chipboard from Too Crafty, and I'm just covering that in the same white embossing powder that I used earlier. So again, the particular chipboard wasn't something that I planned at the start of this layout, but as I'm working through it more and more, I'm looking through my stash and I'm deciding that there are elements that I really want to use and just ways that I can try and help this layout along. So I'm ready to put this page together. I'm going to go ahead and stick my photo down, and my chipboard large piece is going to go around that photo. All the flowers are what's going to go on next, and I struggled with this a little bit too because I wanted to sort of cluster them, and when I clustered them it all just looked wrong. So I kept the flowers by colour and just used them in the lines the same as the stencil had done initially. It's not what I had in my head of how I was going to complete this layout, but I'm really happy with the final product, and it's certainly one that's growing on me. The title of the layout was something that I'd picked as soon as I saw the photo, and I knew that I was going to reuse this acrylic paint to really help it blend in. So these thickers are just foam, and I'm going to go ahead and just use a paintbrush and apply that acrylic paint to those thickers. I just went ahead and let it dry naturally, and while it was drying I went through and popped on the rest of the title using some other letters and thicker titles as well. Okay, now that those titles are coloured, I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this layout together. So the final thing to do is to add that little piece of chipboard lastly and finish off the title. So some more thickers, and I had a general idea of where this title wanted to go, but I wasn't completely sure. So you'll see I'm just sort of fiddling around trying to make sure that I get it in a good position. Now I peeled the sticky part off the back of the O, so I'm just using some glue to stick that down. Small letter titles for the smaller words, and of course the last thing to add will be the word colour. Now in hindsight I probably should have started with the R and worked backwards to get it in the right position, but I guess you live and learn. It all worked out okay though, because I was able to shuffle those letters back along the page and position them according to where they needed to go. So that's the completed layout. You'll see some close-ups of the detail coming up now. I'm really pleased with the final outcome. As I said, I found it tricky initially to work with the mood board, but I definitely got out of my comfort zone and completed a layout that I'm really happy with. So I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you're inspired to play along with us at Off the Rails Scrapbooking. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.